In this question, Emily is participating in a 10K walk, and this graph shows her path. And then we have to find some information about her walk. So let's begin with the first part of her walk, which is segment A, and she travels along this straight line path. The distance she traveled is given by the vertical axis. So if we just move this over to the vertical axis, we can see that she traveled 5 kilometers. And there we go, we can place that in the chart. And time is given by the horizontal axis. So if we just move this down to the horizontal axis, we can see that it took her 40 minutes to travel that 5 kilometers. And we can place that in the chart. Now speed is given by kilometers per minute. So we can just say that her speed would be 5 kilometers per 40 minutes. Now you could simplify this. You could say that 5 goes into there once, goes into 48 times. So that would be a fraction, 1 kilometer every 8 minutes. Or you could use it as a decimal. So if we did it as a decimal, we divide 5 by 40, what we would end up with is decimal, or 0.125 kilometers per minute. And the direction she's traveling in, well, she's 5 kilometers away from where she started, so we're saying that her direction is away from the starting point. Okay, let's look at segment B here, which is along that straight line. So if we go over to the vertical axis for distance, we see that she's still 5 kilometers away, so her change in distance is actually 0. She hasn't moved at all. So she's traveled 0 kilometers in segment B. Now let's look at the time for segment B. Well, if we move down to the horizontal axis, which is the time axis, we can see that she spent the time from 40 to 50 minutes in segment B. So that's a grand total of 10 minutes there. And again, her speed in kilometers per minute for this case would be 0 divided by 10, or 0 kilometers per minute. Well, if she's not traveling any distance, but she's taken some time at that segment, we know that what she's doing is resting. Okay, so let's take a look at segment C, which goes from there to there. So distance traveled, we move all the way over to the vertical axis from her end point, which is right there, and we can see that she's moved from 5 kilometers back down to 0 kilometers away from the starting point, so she's traveled a total of 5 kilometers. And that makes sense because this is a 10K walk, so she walked out for 5 kilometers and walked back for 5 kilometers for a grand total of 10 kilometers. Alright then, how long did it take her to do that? Well, she went from 50 all the way to 100 minutes in segment C, so that's a grand total of 50 minutes. So her speed would be 5 kilometers in 50 minutes. Again, I could write it as a fraction. 5 goes in there once and goes into there 10 times, so she's traveling 1 kilometer every 10 minutes, or as a decimal. So as a decimal, that would be 1/10 of a kilometer every minute. And then, to determine the direction, well, she started 5 kilometers away from the starting point and then came back to the start. So to summarize, Emily started here, walked away from the starting point at a constant rate because it is a straight line. She walked for 5 kilometers. Then she rested for 10 minutes, and then she walked back at a constant rate again, because it's a straight line, back to the starting point. You'll also notice that her speed or rate was faster in segment A, or going out, than it was coming back.